I love darts. Okay, I have to admit, I'm terrible at darts. I don't even really know how to play. I just figure any day that you don't hit the wall, as long as you hit the dart board, that's a good day. I mean, you get points just for hitting the board. You know, when we talk about leading a simple small group, one of the cool things is any day you just don't hit the wall, but you hit the board. Well, that's a good day. And when we think of simple small groups, we really think of three patterns of a healthy group: connecting, changing, and cultivating. And when we think about those, we're not talking bullseyes here. We're not talking about connecting as this deep, abiding community where you're like family. Now, that's great if it is like that, but that's more like the bullseye. As a matter of fact, it kind of moves out from there. Maybe the bullseye is that kind of community where you like sell everything you have and you share your possessions and you all buy like a townhouse together and you all move into this townhouse together and you have this like commune kind of community where you share everything and meals and life and that's beautiful, but that's just one type of connecting. Maybe it's a very tight bullseye, but maybe your group hasn't auctioned off the extra car and shared the resources, but maybe your group started out as a bunch of strangers. You barely knew each other's names. In fact, you kept forgetting each other's names. You had to wear name tags. And now, after a few weeks or a few months, you know names. You know names of kids. You know what each other is into, what you do, your hobbies, your interests. And it's no longer strangers that keep showing up to a living room or a family room or a coffee shop. Instead it's like a group of friends. I think that's it. You went from acquaintance and stranger to friends. You're on the board. You're connecting. We got to give each other a break. It's not about hitting the bullseye of connecting. It's about hitting something in this whole pattern of connecting, of building some relationship with each other. And so when we lead a group, a simple small group, really what we're talking about is living in the world of that pattern in some way. But you know, it's not just connecting. One other pattern of a simple small group is changing. We ought to be different people because we do this. When we gather in a room, we don't just do it because we have nothing else to do. I have plenty to do. How about you? No, I join a group because I think in some way, shape, or form, other people will help me grow more than I'll help myself. In fact, I think a lot of reality will prove this to be right. If you want to start a new fitness program, rarely does it work all by your lonesome. You need some friends, a partner in it to help keep you going. I have this friend, she's into running marathons, or at least she was into running marathons, and she told me, yeah, I'd get up at 5 a.m. and I would run 20 miles before 8. 20 miles! And so I asked the obvious question, what kept you getting up at 5 a.m.? And she said, knowing that someone would be knocking on my door. And so when it comes to like running a marathon or growing in your faith or becoming a better husband or wife or parent, sometimes it takes another person knocking on our door, reminding us, you can change. You can become a different person. You can become a better person. And once again, sometimes we think of change like moving from I was this person to a complete 180. In high school, early years of high school, I had what my mother called a potty mouth. It was her way of saying I curse like a sailor. Although I don't know what it means to curse like a sailor. I'm not sure if that's a profession more prone to swearing than others, but I digress. I swore a lot. I swore all the time. And somewhere in there I realized I should quit taking the Lord's name in vain. I'm pretty sure that one is really bad. Now, I didn't quit using all the swear words, but I quit using those. And I was changing. Yeah, if you overheard me at a store or walking down the street using my colorful language, you would have thought, man, that guy needs to clean up. But if you would have understood, I was changing. Incremental change. I was changing. And a group is like that. Someone comes in and they've never touched the Bible before, and all of a sudden they like start to learn where things are at in the Bible. They're changing. Somebody was very neglectful as a parent. Maybe a dad was devoted to his work and not his family. And after several weeks of being in a group with other folks talking about being a godly parent, he starts to realize, I need to knock off work a little bit earlier, and I need to be home and be invested in my kids. That guy's changing. Maybe it's a situation where at the office you're just not throwing your heart into your work. And you get yourself into some sort of group and the topic comes up that when you work for the Lord. Not for your boss, not for your master, not for a paycheck. You work because you're working for God. And all of a sudden that person approaches work in an entirely different way. Instead of checking Facebook and eBay every 5 minutes at work, they're really throwing their heart and soul into work. They're changing. And a group helps them do it as they talk about real life situations. And that hits the board. It's not hitting the wall. Yeah, okay, maybe it's not, I was this terrible person and now I'm this amazing person. I'm an atheist and now I'm a missionary. Maybe it's not that in a matter of a 12-week small group Bible discussion. But it's still change. But it's not just connecting. And it's not just changing. The third pattern of a simple small group was cultivating. Cultivating a missional life. In other words, it's not just about me. It's not about the way I relate to other people. It's not just about being the hands and the feet of Jesus. And somehow on my own, I start feeling like I'm either doing enough or someone else has more time and ought to do stuff. But when I gather with some other people and together we begin to explore the idea that maybe, just maybe, in my work or in my home or in my neighborhood, God would like me to represent Him. That I ought to throw myself into my work in such a way as to build bridges with folks to point them to the Savior. That I should be cultivating a missional life. And that's what it is. It's missional living. And missional living doesn't mean that I quit being an accountant and then I raise some sport and move to the center of Africa and start ministering to people. That's not missional living. That's one brand of it, but missional living can also be when I talk with people, I express the grace of Christ. That I show Jesus' love and I ask, I pray before I go into a meeting or before I take a walk over to my neighbor's house. God, help me represent you well here. And that's missional living. Thinking about other people and their needs more than your own. And so, it's not one of these things that I do on my own naturally. I wish it was on my own naturally. I just tend to think someone else has a lot more time for this. But when I sit around in a group and we talk about being the hands and the feet of Jesus, one thing comes up loud and clear. We're all busy. None of us have a lot of extra time. So this myth that someone else out there with a lot of time on their hands is going to take care of it, they're not. It's got to be us. And then that feeling of inadequacy, like I could never represent Christ at work or in my neighborhood. I don't know enough. And what if I get asked a tough question? Or what does that even look like? I start to realize that around that living room, we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same place. None of us feels like we have all the answers. But a group comes together and says, you know what? If we aren't the hands and we aren't the feet of Jesus, then who's it going to be? And a group lives out this pattern of cultivating a missional life by having these conversations about what would God have me do here. That's it. That's a simple small group. It's a group that connects with one another, changes to be more like Jesus, and cultivates a missional life. That's it. Simple, and yet remarkably profound. Now, don't be afraid of the wall. Just try to hit the board.